Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second annual Student Equity Advisory Board final presentation. We are extremely excited to have everyone here today. Excuse me, I'm sorry. My name is Sharice Miller-Odukwe, Director of Student Activities for CAS-CIAC. The Student Equity Advisory Board's final presentation started in the wake of social unrest and inequity in our country and our state. Students, athletic directors, principals, and CAS-CIAC staff came together to provide a platform for students to have a voice and to take action to make changes when it comes to inequity in our state. Students have been meeting monthly for the past 8 months and working during their own personal time to research relevant topics to bring to you today. The topics include religious understanding and acceptance in schools, access to quality coaching, facilities, and technology in high school sports, addressing implicit bias faced by LGBTQ+ students, gender bias and racial disparities in Connecticut schools, increasing minority representation in teaching, coaching, and administration, and supporting students with disabilities. After each presentation, we will have a short Q&A session. Please direct your questions to the Q&A feature. I am confident that you will be able to take something back from this presentation today. Please enjoy. And now I would like to introduce Mr. Henry Rondon for a few welcoming words.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. It is great to have everyone out there and listening to the great voices that we have in our state. These are tremendous students who have not only lended their voices, have done some tremendous research, and really have the goal of going back to their school communities and making sure that their voices are heard, that their ideas are implemented. And we're hoping that this happens the same throughout the state of Connecticut, that all of the work that they've done can be shared through all these school communities, administrators, teachers, students, and that everyone who is involved in the school community is able to take these ideas and implement them and make sure that we live in a great state of Connecticut where students are heard, where equity, inclusion is a major part of their communities. So I thank everyone for joining us today. We hope that you are educated, as we will be, by what the students are about to say. And with that being said, I would like to introduce our CAS-CIAC Executive Director, Dr. Glenn Longorini, for a few words. And thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Henry, and good morning, everybody. It has been a great 48 hours here at CAS-CIAC. Yesterday, we recognized over 350 scholar athletes and the leadership that they show in scholarship. And this morning, we kick off with the incredible work that you've done, not only over this past year, but throughout the past couple of years of the Student Equity Advisory Board being in place. Henry and Sharice, we can't thank you enough for your leadership and what is a much needed opportunity to raise student voice. We're honored today to be joined by Commissioner Russell Tucker from the State Department of Education, who has led with elevating student voice throughout her tenure as the Commissioner of the State Department of Ed. Commissioner Russell Tucker, I hope what you hear today makes you proud of our students here in Connecticut, as I know they will. Their work is amazing, and it results in actionable change that happens within our school district to provide a more equitable experience today and for those who follow after them tomorrow. You are such a role model for us throughout the state and the success that we have within Connecticut and within education to be leaders at the forefront of our nation of how we need to provide equitable experiences throughout the state for all kids. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the work that you do. We appreciate everything that you bring to us here in Connecticut. Henry, I'll turn it over to you and Commissioner Russell Tucker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Henry, do you want me to get started? All right, I see you nodding. So perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Glenn, thank you for such a warm and welcoming introduction. And thank you, Sharice and Henry, for all that you're doing in supporting our students. And thanks to all of you for being here today, for inviting me to talk about and to express my appreciation for the work of the Student Equity Advisory Board. And as you know, for those of you that whom have not had the pleasure of speaking with before, and as Glenn mentioned, I am Charlene Russell Tucker, and I'm your Commissioner of Education here in Connecticut. And to our students presenting today, congratulations. So not only have you taken the initiative, as I've heard, to serve on the Student Equity Advisory Board and to dedicate your time, your off time, your, I'm sure, very busy schedules, to do research on these important topics and to put together the presentations that we'll see today. And I really just want to express my deep appreciation for the Connecticut Associations of Schools, CAS, for bringing us together to highlight the Student Equity Advisory Board's research and presentations. If you don't know, CAS has been an invaluable partner to the department in our endeavors to provide extensive resources, guidance, and support to ensure that our districts have in place the most effective practices and strategies to address your student needs anytime and anywhere. And so CAS's continued assistance and alignment with the department's effort that really helped us to make progress in creating enriching, equitable education environment for all our students, for all of you here in our Connecticut education system. And that all is so important. Connecticut is a small but very diverse state. And just in case you don't know where you sit in this mix here, students, you are among over 500,000 students. Yes, over 500,000 students in our schools in Connecticut. You may not know this, but 50% of you, 50% are non-white. If you're doing your math, 43% are eligible for free and reduced price meals. So it shows us kind of the income status. 16% of all of our students are students with disabilities. 8% are English learners, speaking over 145 languages. And across our student body, across all of you, there's over 180 languages spoken in our education system here in Connecticut. And I hope you recognize that is our educational landscape in Connecticut that you're a part of. And we should all be so proud to be part of such a rich and such diverse ecosystem. So that diversity of our students and families can and should be leveraged as one of our greatest strengths when it comes to ensuring equitable access. Glenn mentioned these words as well, to our K-12 system of education in Connecticut. So I am so pleased that we're providing opportunities through this board, through us, for students' voices to be heard, that helps us as the adults supporting the system to put in context the intricate cultural, social, developmental, and environmental backgrounds of all of you, our students, and our staff, and what you all bring to our school communities. So boards like this one, our Equity Advisory Board here, and opportunities such as this, which incorporate our student voice, your voices, remain so important, because as I always say, it cannot be about you without you. And so you're leading the charge today by tackling some very important topics and bringing those back to our schools for action, as Henry mentioned. Some of these topics include, as you access to coaching, to quality coaching and technology, religious understanding and acceptance, gender bias, explicit bias, and more. And some of what you're presenting on today are topics that we're grappling with here at the State Department of Education, such as recruiting and retaining educators of color and providing supports to our students with disabilities. So today, I want you to understand how important it is that you're here sharing your voices. This is a prime example of how we have to be ready and willing to listen to our students, to your voices, to your experiences. And it is so critically important as we emerge. We've been talking about this pandemic that we've all been a part of, but as we go from here, your experiences, what you bring, your recommendations, critically important to us. Some of you may have submitted or proposals, or you've even voted in the election for Voice for Change, which is our first in the nation, yes, in the nation, student participatory budgeting campaign. Just one of the ways we here at the department are uplifting student voice at the state level to implement tangible change in our schools, and it plants the seeds of civic engagement. I hope all of you will spread those seeds of civic engagement and how important it is to share your voice and to make recommendations for us to improve our system here in the state. So we're here to support you. Together, we can continue to advance our shared goals of building schools and building school communities that are equitable spaces to learn and to grow. So thank you and congratulations again to all of you presenting here today. So I regret that I won't be able to stay on for all your presentations, but I look forward to hearing the recommendations that you have for us. And as Henry mentioned, not just to go back to your schools and to put those in practice or to implement them, but for us here at the State Department of Education, along with CAS, our partner, and others, to get this information out across the state to other districts and to look to find ways to implement your recommendations. So thank you again for taking the time. This is time well spent, and we're on our way to making sure that your voices are a rich part of the fabric that makes up our educational system in the state of Connecticut, for you to be successful, for your peers, for your colleagues, and yes, for your voice in the midst of over 500,000 students like yourselves to be heard and be valued. So thank you very much. I turn this back to, is it Henry or Cherie or Glenn? Thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Russell Tucker. We always appreciate your time and we appreciate your support, all of the support that you've given us over the years. We truly appreciate it. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay, so now we will move right into our presentations. We are going to start this morning with religious understanding and acceptance in schools. So it is my honor to start off our final presentations with religious understanding and acceptance in schools with Yasmin Galal. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So our presentation is on religious understanding and acceptance. My name is Yasmin Galal.
My name is Felsi Kyle.
So we put together 3 main elements of religious acceptance that we believe would actually create more inclusive schools, because we know a lot of places will say, oh, this is a safe space, but we wanted to make actual steps that will make a safe space for all religions. So the 3 steps we've created are accommodating holidays, having places to practice, and being understanding of dress codes, especially in athletics.
So a quote that we found is, all religions, cultures, and beliefs deserve the same amount of respect, even if they are different from your own, from an unknown source. So our first recommendation is accommodating holidays. And in doing this, we hope to schedule big events around religious holidays and make sure that students are comfortable missing schools for such holidays.
So a lot of Christian holidays or more common holidays like Christmas and Good Friday are taken off from school, which is definitely understandable, but other students don't have that luxury. And oftentimes that'll leave students stressed about makeup work. I know personally when I have Eid, which is a celebration I have for my religion, sometimes I just find it easier to go to school because of all the work I know I'm going to end up drowning in. And so while we understand that taking off school might not be feasible, we do want schools to offer students extensions and make them feel comfortable missing it and not have to stress about all the work that they're missing. And this should be something that's given to students instead of students having to reach out for it, because I know a lot of students might feel nervous or feel like they're coming off as a bad student if they have to ask for an extension because they're simply celebrating a religious holiday. And a good example of this would be New York City schools, where students take off school for their holidays and then they don't have to stress about their work. So a fair compromise would be giving students extensions while still having school, just since not as many students celebrate certain holidays.
So we found this quote from a survey that my school actually performed. And it says, I understand that there isn't a boatload of diversity at my school, but not being able to fully celebrate my religious holidays because of schoolwork makes life really difficult sometimes. And we don't know which student submitted that response, but it kind of shed some light on the situation that a lot of kids are in. and I go to a relatively small school that isn't extremely diverse, to say the least. So that just kind of gives some insight into the situation. So some solutions are to create those days off for holidays, like Yasmin said, and allow students those extensions of work so that they can actually fully participate in the celebration of their events. And to make sure that students of different religions are also aware of various holidays via curriculum. I feel like there needs to be more learning about holidays that you may not celebrate, because students often don't know the basics about important holidays that they don't necessarily participate in every year.
So the next solution we had, or step we want to see taken, was ensuring that all students have a place to practice their religion. And once again, this is something we want to see provided to students instead of students having to reach out to achieve this. So for example, Muslims have 5 daily prayers that have to be completed by a certain time, especially during Ramadan, which is a very holy month. Similarly, Jews are required to pray 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. And something as simple as like a closet or a flex room would be sufficient for these students. Sometimes, a lot of the times, actually, students have to reach out and ask, oh, is there a place? But what we want to see is that schools say, hey, here's a place we have, you can use it if you would like. And that would remove the burden of students having to stress out about having to ask or worrying about missing class, especially if it's the school offering it to them instead.
So how to achieve this, as Yasmin said, creating those flex rooms or closet spaces for prayer would certainly suffice, as long as there's a place for students to go where they feel comfortable to pray. That's always a great solution. Creating Google Forms is also a really good way to see students' views and religious requirements that they may need throughout the year. And this also ensures that students can't be taken advantage of by the system per se. Informing teachers also, teachers should be informed on behalf of students that will be leaving for a short period of class at certain points of the year for their certain prayer requirements or holiday events. And we should implement this system that allows students to be excused and have more inclusive schools. So our third solution was the dress code. We should allow for religious accommodations within schools, both during the day and during sports, regarding student dress.
Yeah, so here are just some laws on requiring an employer or students to be able to wear and practice their religion. So one thing we wanted to see is, like, if a student can't wear a particular uniform for a sport, for example, we wanted to see that they would be able to get that accommodated, or get their own uniform without, having to be disqualified or things like that, or giving students the option, once again, so that students don't have to reach out and feel that pressure. So it's all about reaching out to students and making sure they feel comfortable practicing their religion. And those are our 3 points. So thank you. And we hope you guys enjoyed hearing about the changes we want to see, places to practice and accommodating holidays and dress code. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin and Felsi, for that great presentation. We will now take questions if anyone has any questions for this group. Okay, we will move on. Great presentation. I love the connections you made. Awesome. Thank you for that. We will now move on to our next presentation. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. We have a quick question here. Any curriculum suggested for holiday observances?
So I know there is the new Black and Latino Studies courses coming to schools, which I'm very excited about. So I think taking away the same concept from that curriculum, but like adding a more religious element to it as well, would be the right idea for a curriculum that would just teach students about the basics of other religions and holidays.
Okay, thank you for those recommendations. All right, we will move on now to our next presentation, which is access to quality coaching facilities and technology in high schools. We have Casey, Dwight, and Elise here to present. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elise Joseph, a ninth grader representing the Academy of Science and Innovation, and I'm so excited to present this topic to you.
Hi, I'm Casey Wines. I'm a senior at Daniel Hahn High School in Madison, and I'm also very excited to present this.
Hi, my name is Dwight Biggs, and I'm a junior at Classical Magnet School.
So our presentation is on the access to quality coaching facilities and technology in high school sports. The first thing we wanted to talk about was the definition of quality. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines quality as the attribute of an elementary sensation that makes it fundamentally unlike any other sensation. So in other, like, simpler words, it's the level of excellence of something measured to other things of a similar nature. And the important thing to remember is that everyone has their own standards and different definitions of quality, which is something that makes quality that's very difficult to measure.
What is equity? Equity is the quality of being fair and impartial by Google definition. Currently in Connecticut, we've lacked equity in quality coaching, facilities, and technologies in high school sports. Why are sports so important? High school sports contribute to mental and physical health, providing an outlet outside of school to help kids relax and have fun. Sports do get people in shape, which is beneficial for both sides of your wellness. Sports motivate kids in the classroom because it motivates them to keep their eligibility, meaning that they cannot participate with a failing or a low grade. Personally, sports allowed me to get more outside my comfort zone and help me find people that share the same interests and passion as I do in my sports. High school sports provide opportunities for people who don't really have those opportunities, opportunities meaning college and competing at a collegiate level in the sport of their choosing. Throughout Connecticut, athletes have vastly different experiences based on their resources and inequities in funding. Sports are spectacular and should be experienced among athletes equitably. As a team, we created a survey among different towns in Connecticut. The goal of the survey was to compare wealthy towns to towns that are underfunded / unresourced. The feedback we got is on the right hand of the screen. And basically, it was just telling us what their schools needed and what can make their schools more equitable. And yeah. We noticed that in the survey, some underfunded towns had way more relevant requests than funded towns. And this basically proved how inequitable Connecticut is with access to quality coaching facilities and technology.
So quality facilities. The Best Things Connecticut wrote an article about good quality facilities used by both high school teams and used by the public all over Connecticut. And they listed 9 facilities, and those facilities were located in Stamford, Canton, Farmington, North Branford, Newtown, Shelton, Trumbull, Montville, and New Milford, which is shown by all the red dots on the map on the left. And as you can see, all those different facilities are fairly spread out, but there are a lot of gaps in between that, some high schools in that area might be lacking a facility, especially in the northeast corner. Without good quality facilities, it's nearly impossible for a team to be successful and to have fun. The biggest issue that I have researched and kind of read about was with the tracks, because tracks can easily become eroded and outmoded, and they cost a lot of money to replace. So what are some things that can impact a program's accessibility to quality facility? The biggest thing that we found was the budget restraints. In an article by the Hartford Courant, it said that it could cost up to $5 million just to upgrade athletic fields. And that was an article about Enfield High School. And schools usually don't just have $5 million sitting around that could be used to upgrade those fields. So it just shows, how much money quality facilities need. Another thing that recently impacted a program's accessibility and quality facility was COVID. With COVID, it limited many teams from being able to use a lot of indoor and even some outdoor facilities. And a lot of those restrictions might not be 100% back to normal. And teams, a lot of the time have lost habits of constantly or consistently going to specific facilities. School and team sizes. Smaller schools and smaller teams have to pay more to play, and therefore they have less money and less funds to rent a quality facility. Location and transportation. Off-campus facilities, like a lot of pools or ice hockey rinks or indoor tracks, those cost money because you need to rent them. And it also costs funding from the school and from the team, because a lot of times teams want to pay for different transportation. So that's another issue. Public facilities. Public facilities might limit a team's practice time or even the facility quality if it's being used by many, many different people. And then the graph on the bottom was also from our survey. And the question is, do you feel like you have a quality facility / equipment? And 1, which is all the way on the left, means that they strongly disagree with that statement. And 5 means that they strongly agree. And most of our responses were in the 4 category, which means that they, probably mostly agree. But there are a lot of people who are in the 1, 2, and 3 category, which means that they disagree with the statement of having a quality facility.
Right. So before we could talk about quality coaching, we have to first think about what things make a quality coach. So there's 3 major things. First one is coaching knowledge. So coaching knowledge is actually knowing about the sport and knowing how to teach your athletes about it and actually help them get better. The second thing is athletes' outcomes. And so it's when you're a coach, it's not just about winning games or reaching a certain number or rank. You have to actually help your athletes on and off the court or field, actually teach them life skills and help them and guide them through life and outside of the sports world. And the last one is a safe coaching environment where you can where they can actually help the athletes get better and make sure they can speak to their athletes and athletes feel comfortable in that environment. So yeah, to be a quality coach, you need to be educated in the sport you teach and able to guide the athlete in that sport, but also in life, like I said. And in most high schools, this is not the case, especially in underfunded towns of Connecticut. More often than not in schools, they can't find experienced coaches that they can afford. So instead of giving athletic programs good coaches, they just end up having teachers or faculty fill in instead. And I could relate to this because I go to class school, which is in Hartford, and a lot of our coaches, they're not not really experienced coaches. They're more faculty members, guidance counselors, or some teachers just filling in because the track team right now is a teacher that teaches Latin, and the soccer team is a guidance counselor, and they just have to fill in because we don't have access to a lot of coaches. So just so we could play and make sure we have a season, teachers have to fill in instead. So this results with the athletes just being stuck with inexperienced coaches who probably they've played the sport, but they don't really know much about it or how to really coach a sport and get you better. And this is a problem because a coach can really be the factor that determines how far someone could get in their athletic journey. And I think a solution to fixing this is having more of a training for coaches, make sure they're qualified to actually coach that sport and they know what they're doing. They can actually help the athletes get better.
So going off what Dwight mentioned earlier about educating the coaches, I think the biggest thing that we can do is continue to educate coaches and refine their skills and help them be inclusive and fair and show good leadership and have good culture within the team. Success starts with good coaching. And if a team is successful, I see this a lot at my school where one team would be super successful and they'll get more funding from the school and from the town, and they'll tend to have better quality facilities and technology than other teams that might not be as successful if they don't have a good coach. So better quality facilities and technology will follow success. And yeah, like I said, teams that have a history of being more successful tend to have better facilities and technology. So it really all just starts with good quality coaching, which is something that Dwight really talked a lot about. So, and yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, group members. Well, very well done. At this time, if you have any questions, we will take them for the group. Okay, one question. Okay, so question for the group. What do you consider a good coach? Maybe if we can get a couple of you to respond that, all right? So what do you consider to be a good coach?
I think a good coach, I kind of had that bulleted list that I went through super quickly on the last slide, but they're inclusive and they're fair and they're not really biased at all. And they're not only, they don't only have a lot of good knowledge about the sport, but they know how to handle adversity. And, if a team is struggling or a player is struggling, they know how to handle that. And they're good mentors and leaders.
Thank you. And maybe if we could get just one more member of the group to answer that question, that'd be great.
A good coach is somebody you can go to, doesn't even have to be involved with your own sport, but a good, like Casey said, a mentor you can go to and don't feel any reason not to go to them when you need help. So.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions out there? Thank you to that group. Actually, we have one more. And definitely comment out there that definitely there's an agreement that there definitely needs to be definitely more quality coaching. And definitely we want to see that improve in the state and have the most effective adults leading our student athletes as much as possible. So thank you again to that group. So we will at this point move on to our next group, which is addressing implicit bias faced by LGBTQ students. So members of that group, you are on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kirtither Sandhya, and I'm a junior at Windsor High School, and I'm accompanied with Heather Gomez, who's also a junior at Westbrook High School, and we're going to be talking about the bias towards the LGBTQ+ community.
All right, we're going to start off by defining the acronym LGBTQ+, where the LGBTQ+ refers to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and more, where the more captures other sexual and gender identities, where we have, for example, pansexual or being queer. And some important terms to know throughout this presentation are the following: cisgender, which refers to people whose gender identity and expression matches the biological sex assigned at birth. We're usually cis, and cisgender is tied into being a cis woman or cis man. And then we have gender fluid, which is a person who does not identify with one gender or has a fluid slash unfixed gender identity, where in simple words, it's an individual whose gender isn't just defined by being woman or being man, but rather their expression is done through in between both. Then we're going to be talking about the implicit bias, the specific implicit bias towards LGBTQ+ individuals, where the first point we want to make is stereotyping and categorizing. Where in stereotyping, it usually comes from assumptions and anti-gay myths that perpetuate within our society, where we have, for example, becoming gay or trans because of being molested in childhood, or just not having a firm father figure or mother figure during childhood, which are all assumptions, which is just two of many assumptions within our society that contribute to biases towards the community as a whole. And because of these assumptions and anti-gay myths, it usually leads to categorizing the whole community as being violent, immoral, or simply being lost in our world. And then we have our next topic, which would be the usage of words and statements that have biases in them, where we obviously know that speech is a daily part of our lives. And because our speech is so important to us, we usually have bias in our speech that affect the LGBTQ plus community, where we have, for example, the usage of slurs without knowing the implications or history of the word, where many individuals just use it without knowing the impact it has on people. And then we have in another example, using statements, whether it's a comment or it's a joke in which we belittle the community as a whole, where we have, for example, making fun of men who show their femininity and associating that with weakness, which just ties in with specific bias towards LGBTQ plus members. Then we have the topic of being defensive on anti-LGBTQ plus opinions, where usually this behavior derives from this feeling of being personally attacked, where we can have, for example, a cisgendered woman feeling that trans women aren't women enough simply because they're trans, where many of these cis women feel that they're personally being attacked since their idea of womanhood is being redefined by trans women. And this whole notion of having a defensive behavior derives from, usually leads to many individuals invalidating LGBTQ plus experiences and or livelihood. And this all occurs because in our society, we tend to want assimilation rather than diversity, where in a simulation, we have our whole society wanting to achieve a standard or a norm created by the top, if we want to put it in that way, rather than in diversity, where in diversity we all have our own differences and we express our uniqueness. Then we're going to be moving on to our next slide, which is what causes people to have bias towards the LGBTQ plus community. And a key point we want to make is the fact that our brain is wired to have patterns, our brains are wired to look for patterns in the world, where we tend to do so because we like shortcuts. We like to simplify our world. And because we tend to simplify our world, we usually form biases from our environment and experiences, where in an environment, we have factors such as politics, social media portrayals, beliefs and moral systems, cultural conditioning, education, and etc. And within past experiences, we have experiences such as not having LGBTQ plus individuals in a social group growing up. And we also have political events that affect our biases, where, for example, we have in the 1950s, the Lavender Scare, which was the mass dismissal and execution of lesbian and gay government officials because they were quote unquote affiliated with communist governments. And in the 1980s, we had pseudoscience publications that the LGBTQ plus were seen as or were serial murderers, or and they molested children and they spread diseases such as HIV and etc. And in the 1980s, this usually led to it led to the media portrayal of the AIDS epidemic being a punishment from God, where news coverage only saw them as victims, being just case numbers and not really being seen as human. And recently in our time, we see that in 2018, we had only 41 anti-LGBTQ laws. And then we fast forward to 2022, in which it skyrocketed up to a shocking number of 238 anti-LGBTQ laws. And our next point is the fact that what causes people to have biases is our basic lack of information or understanding of identities that are formed by the LGBTQ plus community and the issues faced by the community, where we have, for example, many people being uncertain on this identity of being trans, since they lack the basic understanding of identifying what male and female means, whether it's based on biological anatomy, whether it's based on physical expression alone, genital anatomy alone, and it all just comes together to just confuse the individual. And in another example, we have understanding gender expression through pronouns, where many individuals just tend to push away the fact that many individuals just don't feel comfortable with using, our quote unquote norm of he or she. And it all just trickles down to just this basic lack of understanding and information towards our society. Christy would be taking it over.
So thank you, Heather, for giving all of that information. That was the precursor research and knowledge that we gained beforehand, just so we could be well versed on this topic. And we also wanted you to have it so that you could have a solid foundation of what biases are present within Connecticut schools towards the LGBTQ plus community. So then we wanted to conduct a survey within Connecticut schools in order to gain some data on what is really happening within our state and how the LGBTQ plus members and non-LGBTQ plus members feel about the bias present within our state. So we created 2 surveys. One was sent to the LGBTQ plus student population, and the other was sent to the non-LGBTQ plus student population. And they were a mixture of open-ended and multiple choice questions that they answered. And again, it was sent to Connecticut students in various schools. So there's a representative answer from different areas within the state and how students feel within different districts. So first, we're going to look at the results of the survey from the LGBTQ plus student population. And the first statement posed was, I feel accepted and welcomed in my school environment. And as you can see from the pie chart, about close to 50% did agree that they do feel accepted and welcomed in their school environment, but a large number, 30.4% were neutral, and about another 20% did feel as if they were not accepted. So that, again, we don't want those numbers to be that large. We want the majority to feel accepted and welcomed within their school environment. Another question that was posed was, I feel my school accepts my pronouns. And we had a pretty equal distribution. About 30% did say they either strongly disagree or disagree that their pronouns were accepted. And pronouns are, again, something simple that we're going to mention near the end. To make students feel accepted, you can just ask them their pronouns, and that will make them feel like you do care about their identity and however they may identify. But again, another 38% did say they did agree or strongly agree that their pronouns were accepted. The next statement was, I face ignorant and or insensitive comments or behaviors about my LGBTQ plus identity within my community. And that's on the upper left. And 41.9% said they agree that there are ignorant or insensitive comments made to them about their LGBTQ plus identity within their community. And 13.9% strongly agreed. So that is a large number of students who feel as if there is a culture of facing insensitive comments or their identity not being accepted, or them feeling as if they're out of place. And we want to change those numbers so that most of them disagree and say that no, there aren't ignorant or insensitive comments. The second statement was, my school deals with issues surrounding LGBTQ plus students in an appropriate manner, and that's on the right. And 45.6% were neutral, meaning they neither felt they disagreed or agreed, which we want everyone to feel like the school is going to deal with the issues that may come up in an appropriate manner so that they can feel safe and they can feel that they can express their true identity. And finally, does your school have an LGBTQ plus club? And the blue part, which is 87.3%, represents yes. So that is a positive note that 87.3% of students do have an LGBTQ plus club at their school where they can have a safe environment that they can go to. And then for the open-ended questions, we asked, what are ways in which your community can improve in acceptance and awareness of the LGBTQ plus community? And what could your school do better to provide an inclusive environment for the LGBTQ plus community? So both of these questions had responses which kind of overlap. So the answers that are at the bottom are a synopsis of all the responses we got. And one of the first suggestions was have school lessons on LGBTQ plus inclusion. Again, incorporating this learning and history into the actual curriculum and courses like Heather had mentioned, really making others aware and informed about the previous history of the LGBTQ plus community in the present, what's going on, so that we can be more aware and cognizant of our LGBTQ plus peers. Discussing microaggressions is another one, because microaggressions were one of the most common ways that students did face insensitive or ignorant comments. And a lot of times those microaggressions are an implicit bias. They come out of a place where the students don't even know that they're making a comment that could be rude or offensive to members of the LGBTQ plus population. So again, discussing these microaggressions, being aware of them, and really making an active effort to not use them against the LGBTQ plus population. Another suggestion was teachers and students respecting and using the proper pronouns and names of LGBTQ plus members. Pronouns are, again, a simple way to incorporate this respect and understanding to make the students feel welcomed and their identity feel accepted. So again, a suggestion is maybe asking their pronouns in the beginning of the year, or if they respectfully do tell you to call them by a certain name or use certain pronouns, being cognizant of that, aware of that, and really trying to respect that and use those pronouns. Another suggestion was having students, videos, informed adults, and other methods utilized to educate all members of the school on the LGBTQ plus history, culture, and how to be more inclusive. Again, there's no one better to talk to peers than their peers themselves or members within their school district and community. So using those methods to really have assemblies or discussions, advisories where they can sit and learn about the culture and the history of the LGBTQ plus community, really grow as a community and a group in a school, will help there be a more accepting and welcoming environment. And another statement was stop making LGBTQ plus members feel as if they're different. So again, treating them as equals, not pulling them out of the group of normal students, because being LGBTQ plus doesn't mean they're not normal. It's just that their identity is different and they want to be identified in a different way, but really making LGBTQ plus a normality within schools. And administrators need to stop letting microaggressions and rude comments get passed on without addressing them. This is something that I really want to stress, because we need to make sure that the culture and the environment at the school is listening and really trying to accept others and letting everyone feel welcomed within the environment. And for that, the administrators need to enforce these rules so that there aren't microaggressions happening, and that the students do feel like they can go to their administrators and stand up for themselves. Now onto the survey for the non-LGBTQ plus student population. The first statement posed was, I feel as if my school values my pronouns and other people's pronouns. And we had a majority do say they agree, which is great, especially since that they do feel that their pronouns are accepted. But again, it's a great juxtaposition to what the LGBTQ plus population said, that they don't feel as if their pronouns are accepted. So there's, again, this lack of awareness, and there's a discrepancy between the two answers. And the second statement was, I hear derogatory statements like that's okay or you're so gay, that undermine the LGBTQ plus population. And we did have about 47% strongly agree, which is a lot, saying that they do hear that often within their schools, and 47% of students do hear it all the time, which we want to bring that number down so that very few of these microaggressions or statements that can be rude or insensitive are made. The third statement was, my school deals with issues surrounding LGBTQ plus students in an appropriate manner. And 43.1% did agree, while if you looked at the survey from before with the LGBTQ plus population, many of them were neutral. So again, that's a discrepancy where maybe there's a lack of awareness with the non-LGBTQ plus population of what is going on. And then the final statement was, does your school have an LGBTQ plus club? And 63.8% did say yes, but again, there's a starking 36.2% who said, I don't know. And that leads to the point of like that lack of awareness, that lack of knowledge about what is going on within their building. And then the results from the survey conducted for the non-LGBTQ plus student population. Again, the open-ended questions were the same, so I'm not going to reiterate them, but the responses were also overlapping, such as accepting and using proper pronouns. The proper pronouns are, again, a key component of a simple way to make students feel accepted and welcomed, and really being respectful of that. And then another suggestion was allowing people to feel accepted for who they are by having an open mind. Again, like Heather mentioned, we have these stereotypes and norms within our minds, but we need to go in with an open mind to accept other stories and whatever their experiences are, and being able to really take them in. Another solution was having stricter consequences. So again, that's on the administrative end. If there are derogatory statements or insensitive comments made, making sure that there is a consequence following to establish a culture of really having an accepting environment where there aren't microaggressions or rude comments being posed. Next is standing up against homophobia and standing by LGBTQ plus members. There does not need to be like a big action made to really make a solution and make an accepting and welcoming environment. Simply being a friend to someone who may not have someone to be there with them at school, sitting with someone at lunch who may be excluded because of their identity, is a way to really foster this accepting and welcoming environment. And you might be the change with one person to make someone's day better. And having more lessons to learn about the LGBTQ plus community, that again comes down to really being able to listen to others and understand their stories to become well aware. And something that really stood out was that there were responses like, I don't care, or I don't know. And that's again, that lack of awareness, lack of knowledge. And we want students to care, because members who are part of the LGBTQ plus population within the school are their peers. And we want all the students to care about each other and have a fostering and positive culture. And then we wanted to figure out a way to give you guys an acronym or a method to really combat this issue, and how you can solve it within your school, workplace, within your own lives, like how you can really be aware of your bias that you may have. And the acronym we came up with was AURA, and it stands for Awareness, Understanding, Reevaluating, and Advocating, which we will be explaining.
All right, so the first A in AURA is awareness. And when we talk about awareness, our first point is we want to become aware of LGBTQ plus issues. What do the issues look like at the worldwide level? What do they look like at the nationwide level? What do they look like at the state level? And what do they look like within our communities? And another point I want to bring is the fact that we shouldn't just look at LGBTQ plus issues, but also just all social issues as a whole, since we'll be talking more about that in our next slide. But it's important to just understand social issues and what are the different issues that are being combated by LGBTQ plus members themselves. And then we have another point, which is just basically understanding that bias comes down to two different types, which would be implicit bias and explicit bias, where in explicit bias, these are usually biases where we intentionally want to harm individuals. But in implicit bias, these are biases that come in our daily actions, daily speech, unconsciously, where they usually derive from, as we talked about, they usually derive from our assumptions, from our past experiences, from our environment, and etc. And a question I want to pose is, how can we become aware? And I would love to see what people have to say about their opinions and just ideas of how to become aware. So yeah, we can look at what people have to say at the end of this presentation.
Thank you, Heather. And then the U stands for understanding, meaning gaining knowledge through the LGBTQ plus members themselves, right? You can't really build knowledge about anything without understanding the other person's perspective, even if you're from the outside. And after you gain this awareness of really knowing what your biases are and what your judgments are, you want to be able to listen to the LGBTQ members themselves and hear their stories and hear their experiences, so that you can become more aware and become more accepting of their identities, because you'll be learning more about them. You might want to become informed on oppressive laws and movements or historical events. Heather mentioned quite a few in the beginning, and knowing these things makes you well versed with the culture in the previous events that occurred with the LGBTQ plus community. And that way you can be more respectful and sympathetic towards the LGBTQ plus members, and especially being aware of the present events that are happening so that you can be an ally and support the LGBTQ plus community. You want to take on different perspectives. Social issues are interconnected, and many different political events are related to and different historical events, and that might be related to the LGBTQ plus community. So really hearing different sides of the story, because not everyone's story is the same. Not everyone's LGBTQ plus story is the same. So really hearing their true, authentic, raw story so that you can become a better person in understanding where everyone comes from. And finally, listening with an open mind. It is so important to listen to understand and not listen to respond, because you are trying to listen and gain knowledge of the other person and really become better at understanding your bias. That way you can cope with it and educate others about it.
Then we'll be moving on to reevaluating, where when we're reevaluating, once we have our basic, or once we become aware, and once we understand more of the different issues conflicted on LGBTQ plus individuals, we get to start reevaluating. We get to start reevaluating our views and beliefs on the LGBTQ plus community. Are they negative? Are they positive? You know, do you have biases? And then reevaluating sources of information. Do our sources contain bias? Do our sources come from LGBTQ plus members themselves? Are our sources credible? Then we have reevaluating our social interactions. Our family and friends, do they have biases that influence your biases towards the community as a whole? Does your upbringing, did your upbringing have biases that negatively affected the community as a whole? And do your social interactions as a whole, do you see different implicit or explicit biases just trickled all throughout your interactions throughout the day? And our last point would be just reevaluating active oppression in one's environment. Do you yourself contribute to the issue as a whole, or the various issues that are contained within our society concerning LGBTQ plus issues?
And finally, the awareness, the understanding, the reevaluating doesn't have much meaning if you don't do any advocating, don't take any action from all that you've learned and gained knowledge about, and really rethought and reevaluate it. So the first way to do this is using your voice. That is a simple way. We all have a voice that we can use. It doesn't mean you need to have a assembly or a small engagement where you're speaking to everyone, but using your voice against one person, maybe standing up for someone, or educating others about it by using your voice, educating someone who may not have the knowledge that you have, and using your power or influence. If you are on a board, a committee, a group that you can influence by using your voice and using the knowledge you've learned, using that power that you have and helping impact others. And then spreading the knowledge you've learned, this knowledge you've gained through the research, through hearing other stories, spread it to others so that there can be more acceptance and more welcoming environments formed within the schools, workplaces, even social communities, and standing alongside LGBTQ members in simple acts of kindness. Again, if you don't want to use your voice against someone, you can simply just sit with someone or be by someone's side who may be facing exclusion because of their LGBTQ plus identity, and that can go a long way. So again, there's various ways that you can take action and advocate, and whatever you think you can do and is within your capacity is what you should follow. And we also wanted to leave you with some solutions that you can take back to implement within your schools that Heather will be talking about.
All right, so realistic solutions to implement within our schools. Our first point is adding LGBTQ plus clubs or student equity clubs, where some schools may be just very small and just may not have a lot of LGBTQ plus individuals, but by forming, student equity clubs, you can get many diverse students and, LGBTQ plus individuals themselves who can, one, come together to create safe place to create a safe place for people who want to share, their issues they're confronting as part of a marginalized community or just within a social issue, and within, the topic of LGBTQ plus issues. Many of these individuals can just come and be in a safe place where they're able to talk about their life and just the different complications they're going through. By forming these clubs, you also create a much more inclusion-based culture, where the club itself can, one, promote throughout the school this inclusion-based culture, but within the club itself, by just having many diverse students who could come together and really discuss how their issues are conflicted within their life, but also how they all come together to, just tackle down on, just the fact that society, has different norms and standards, just creates this inclusion-based culture, as well as the topic, as well as forming assemblies and roundtable discussions in the classroom setting, where we can have we can have that moment to really educate staff, teachers, and students on LGBTQ plus issues, but not only the issues, but also the history, and within the history, both positive and the negative history that have been experienced by the LGBTQ plus community. Whereby having these discussions, whether at the school level or just in the classroom setting, whether we're discussing an issue, a prevalent issue within society, and just talking about the LGBTQ plus perspective of it, it really just ties into this notion of just fostering this inclusion-based culture and creating a safe place, as well as educating and really understanding. Then we have our next point, which would be just adopting and implementing a clear and consistent and comprehensive non-discrimination policies, where our schools may already have policies that state that discrimination isn't allowed, but are these policies clear within our school? And do people who violate these policies, are they reprimanded? Are they faced with consequences more than just being told, hey, don't do that again, or that's unacceptable, just don't do it. Just don't do it again. And these are all factors is just to take into consideration when just looking at realistic solutions to implement within our schools. And we have a statistic here that states that 75% of transgender youth feel unsafe at school. And because of this, they feel because they feel unsafe, they're more likely to miss out on further concern of their safety, which is just a statistic to really take into mind when looking at our ways of implementing realistic solutions within our schools.
And then the final method is including adequate and accessible mental health outlets, rehabilitation outlets, counselors, and advisors, having a safe space that these students can go to, having a safe space where they can really rely on someone is crucial to their success as students academically and socially. And there are LGBTQ plus students who experience higher incidence of substance misuse, depression, suicidal ideation, or academic disengagement. And to cope with all of these things, we know that we can't make accepting and welcoming environments within the whole school in one go. So slowly implementing these mental health outlets and having these safe spaces or advisors that these students can rely on and consistently go to will make a better environment and start fostering an accepting and welcoming culture. So we hope you took these solutions and we hope you got a better understanding of the biases towards the LGBTQ plus community from our presentation. And we want to thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
I think I saw a question in the chat that said if there are any curriculum suggested for LGBTQ plus inclusion or at the elementary level. And in my opinion, I feel that it's important to, an important topic to cover would be this idea of wanting diversity rather than discrimination. Just because, there may be a lot of parents that just don't feel quote unquote comfortable with seeing children being taught LGBTQ plus history or just culture or issues they're confronting, since, you know, we see in Florida that the anti or don't say gay law passed, you know, and it's just, I feel like a better way to include this inclusion-based topic of, you know, LGBTQ plus community curriculum.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. We have one more question here. What suggestions do you have to educate the community around this topic? There seems to be a lack of understanding around gender identity.
One suggestion that we mentioned is, again, having these inclusive, open conversations about the topic. That is a great way to, again, gain understanding, having actual students who may identify as LGBTQ plus coming in and talking to you, sharing their experiences to teachers, admin, and students, so that we can all be well aware of the peers surrounding us, as well as really just finding information yourself, really being aware of your surroundings. It's not that you need to go on and do full research, but again, it's about having this accepting and welcoming mindset.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. And we are now going to move on to gender bias and racial disparities in Connecticut schools.
Okay, so hi, my name is Melinda Liu, and I'm going to be here with Mingir Jha, who we're both from Amity Regional High School, and we're both juniors, and we're going to be presenting about gender bias and racial disparities in Connecticut. And since we're in the same room, we'll just be, for the sake of convenience, we'll be using my mic, so you'll hear Ming's voice from my end. So to start with the presentation, we kind of want to give you like a perspective of what's happening within the US first, and then we're going to do a deep dive into what's happening within Connecticut. So within the topic of race in the US, there's kind of like a big divide in like how people view race in education. For example, there's been a lot of news recently about states passing like limited education bills on things like critical race theory, or having proposed legislation on how we shouldn't be teaching this to students within schools. And then on the other side, we have many other states passing legislation and drafting educational standards on ethnic studies courses, which essentially gives students the opportunity to like learn about different cultures and different racial groups. So within the United States, also in the case of gender, there's also this type of divide. As we see for some schools, they are starting to increase the amount of material on gender identity and sexual orientation. And basically what gender identity is, it's based on the self-perception of your own gender. And some schools, even starting as early as elementary school, they're starting to introduce these topics to students. While in some other states, they've passed laws that like restrict what students learn about these topics. And now if we go into Connecticut and kind of like what's happening, Connecticut is more on the side of being more favorable towards teaching about race and education, including it within the curriculum. For example, recently it was very popular in the news about the critical race theory like protests at schools. And many teachers have actually like defended like about teaching and saying that like it needs to be taught, like the historical racism needs to be like taught about, and students need to know that this was something that happened within the United States. And also in Connecticut in 2022, there's going to be the Black and Latino Studies courses that are going to be implemented in all Connecticut schools. And now if we go on the case of gender, many parents on boards of education agree that in order to create a safer environment for all students, you need to make sure you teach about these different orientations so students are introduced to this and they become more comfortable with having the idea of like other students can associate with different types of genders and not just male and female. And so how Connecticut implements this is mainly through the SEL curriculum that is meant to teach tolerance and is usually introduced from grades 1 to 5. And this is usually done in the form of like books that students read and also a lot of like classroom discussion.
So Melinda gave you the context for what has been happening in terms of education towards race and gender disparities in schools. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of context for what we actually went ahead and did in our project to address the issues that we were addressing in our topic. So on the impact of student stories on perception, we have a quote from Henry Thoreau: "Could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant?" And also, it has been proven through much research that stories can generate empathy, which then generates pro-social action or action focused on helping others, as you're able to sympathize and empathize with other people's experiences. It also breaks down biases and fosters inclusivity. This has been proven in research from Seattle University, Claremont University, etc. So basically, we found that personal stories have a really powerful effect at connecting people to others and like activating certain neural networks that allows people to emphasize with others and then achieve the societal actions that we want. So this has been not only been shown through like the humanities, but also been proven through the sciences. So now onto our project, which was called Wording CT. What is Wording CT? Wording CT is a publication that we created which aims to give historically underrepresented voices a chance to be heard. And what we did is we used in the form of an ebook to share personal stories of students and educators and community members in CT to create greater awareness of student perspectives. So we had a lot of participants submit their stories, and then we put them together in the form of an ebook. This ebook called Wording CT will be provided as a curriculum resource for educators, especially since, as we talked about before, there is a Black and Latino studies course being implemented in the fall of this year, as well as a great push for Asian studies courses to also be implemented in public schools. So the timeline for this project and basically what we went ahead and did this year is we spent a month in November planning out what we were going to do. We then spent the months of December consulting with different experts and activists in the community to look at who we should target and which groups we should pull stories from in order to supplement our publication. We had the months of January and March were our months for submissions and also promotions, and we made a lot of flyers in order to like post around different schools and communities. And then we spent the last 2 months on the construction of our ebook, and here we are. So on to the next slide. This is a link to our Wording CT publication. And Mel, would you be able to send?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Mel put the link to our ebook in chat, but I'll just quickly take you through what our ebook looks like. This is Wording CT. Our table of contents includes testimonies of community members which were submitted, and also some of them were publicly available on supporting like different bills that we talked about in CT, which is about inclusion of like ethnic studies in public schools. And then we have a section on breaking down gender barriers in education, as well as a lot of personal stories from different students and people in the community. Right, so thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Just taking to see if there are any questions. Seeing none, thank you to that group for presenting. So we'll just keep moving on. Our next group is going to be increasing minority representation in teaching and coaching and administration. So to that group, please go right ahead.
Okay. Hi, hope everyone is having a fabulous morning. My name is Recia Barron, and I am currently a senior at Wyndham High School. Today, I will be helping to discuss our research findings and potential solutions to minority representation in teaching, coaching, and administration.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Akash Valepali, and I'm a junior at Fairfield Ludlow High School.
Morning, my name is Isaiah Waring. I'm a junior at Classical Magna High School, and I'm thankful to be here.
1 second. Very sorry. Okay.
Okay, so while this issue is widespread in both Connecticut and the United States, there are a couple of key reasons resolving this issue should be a top priority within schools. Increasing minority representation will help students feel more connected and more comfortable within the environment that they should be seeing as a place to learn and grow their mind, while in the presence of trusted adults. This would also lead to a decrease in racial and minority developed attacks through the promotion of inclusivity. Lastly, the increase would also encourage students to broaden their horizons, whether it be trying out a new sport or deciding to take on a role in education or coaching following high school. Minority representation has a high correlation to low performance schools, with many of these issues being factors that play into the struggle to fix this issue. Along with monetary reasons, teachers don't get a lot of input in school decisions, and pay benefits are significantly smaller in other comparable jobs. According to the US Department of Education, low-performing schools rank in the bottom 10% of their state. This issue leads to one of the biggest issues in minority representation in education, turnover rates. In order to fight against the struggle, schools need to show academic improvement in order for teachers to keep their jobs, along with encouraging teachers to stay within the district so that inexperienced teachers don't fill the open roles. Since students in minority groups rarely have teachers who look like them or share similar experiences, increased representation in educators should lead to increased academic performance and less turnover.
As stated previously, high staff turnover is a leading cause of low representation of minorities in educational institutions. This issue continues to add to the growing teacher shortage, placing low-income students at an even greater disadvantage. In simple terms, lack of quality teachers leads to less personal attention, along with the fact that teachers are expected to do more with a lot less money. In our research, we found that at least 20% of educators come from minority backgrounds. Of this small percentage, just 7% of teachers were Black, 9% were Hispanic, and 2% Asian American, with the other percent consisting of the majority, which was white. The problem with this data is that children base their futures on what they see and observe every day. So without the academic environments in which students see their teacher as a role model, they will not find the same opportunities and encouragement in talking on a role in education.
There is almost an immediate connection between teachers and administration, as most often administrators held a teaching position before their current role within the school. Increasing representation in teaching will also help increasing minority representation within school administration. We can start to resolve this issue by making teaching programs and opportunities available to all districts through local Connecticut colleges and universities, along with school counselors. This will provide the necessary emphasis on jobs and education and coming back to schools within the district. Starting off, the Connecticut State Board of Education has approved a variety of educator preparation programs offered by many state colleges, including alternate route certification programs. Some of these programs can be found at Albertus Magnus College, CCSU, Connecticut College, ECSU, SCSU, UConn, Quinnipiac, and more. There are also many nationwide programs available, such as the Turnaround School Leaders Program, which provides a framework that focuses on forming partnerships to build up the skills and knowledge of educators and leaders, especially those who may move on to become principals, assistant principals, or administrators. And Teach for America, which is another well-known program that works to allow every child to receive excellent and equitable education by finding leaders that commit to expanding opportunities for low-income students, beginning by placing them in public schools for a minimum of 2 years. As a student at Windham High School, our school is located right across the street from Eastern Connecticut State University. This year, they allowed us to form a partnership with them in which students are enrolled at an online class at Eastern that is a multiculturalism course required by all education majors. Students who decide to attend Eastern under an education major are able to get free tuition if they promise to come back to Windham Public Schools in the future. Through this program, students are able to get a taste of education before they actually choose it as a major, and students that decide that they don't want it to go into an education major can transfer this course into an elective for their major. I spoke with a student that is currently enrolled in the program, and she has said this program has provided her with an extraordinary opportunity to gain access to the education field while in high school, as this program is completely free and self-paced. Reaching out to other Connecticut state colleges who may have some sort of education program and involving them in a program we have with Eastern may lead to a substantial increase in minority representation, especially in low-income communities where this wasn't an option previously.
There are numerous factors that have contributed to the lack of minority representation in high school and college level coaching. A key leadership and mentorship role that can change students' athletes' lives. Coaching and major leadership roles have only recently started to get filled by people of color because of the racism embedded into the cultural fabric of our country that they decided that they cannot be leaders. The importance of coaching is undeniable. In the most recent study by Annenberg Foundation of Education Reform in 2004, it found that coaches can effectively encourage collaborative and reflective habits. Coaching is also a very personal role that allows coaches to apply their learning deeper into students' minds and more consistently than teachers. Coaching doesn't just stop at students either. It supports teachers, helping improve their capacity to self-reflect and apply their ability to work and connect with students. Careful hiring practices will not just make the students feel more comfortable in their environment, but could also improve their overall academic experience of the students and teachers.
The process to obtain a coaching certification requires many long hours, along with a hefty fee. Unless you are a teacher in Connecticut, you are required to take a 45-hour clock course that costs nearly $500. While the holder of the certification must be 18 and hold a high school diploma or equivalent, they must have also completed a standard first aid course and the correct CPR certification. For those in which the certification process is not as accessible, offering some of the required training to students in high school, either in or outside the school, may help students interested in pursuing a job, coaching the opportunity to finish the required training early and for free.
Another way to increase minority representation is reaching out within the local community to alumni. Some of you may know Alfonso Vasquez, who graduated from Windham High School in the class of 2020. Following his career, he signed with Hartford Athletic. He is a vital member of his new team. While he is also a vital member of his new team, he also loves coming back to his school and community he grew up in. By reaching out to people like Alfonso and other alumni in the area, we can find people of minority groups who may be willing to come back to coach and mentor the younger generations, bringing communities and cultures together. Any questions?
Okay, thank you for your presentation. At this time, I do not see any questions. So we will move on to our final group, which is supporting students with disabilities.
Okay, my name is Emily Bridges, and I'm part of the Supporting Students with Disabilities group, and Anushka is going to share her screen.
Hi everyone, I'm Anushka Acharya. I am a junior at Amity High School. So the first thing I want to do is talk about what different types of disabilities there are, and just to give more information about it, because I feel people don't really understand what it means to have a disability and what that really means in the classroom, especially with regards to sports. So a physical disability is a condition that limits the range of basic physical activities of life. Examples include walking, climbing stairs, carrying, lifting, etc. And in the classroom, this can be seen in someone's posture, the way they grasp or manipulate objects, how they communicate, eat, or their reflex movements. 16% of people in the United States have some sort of physical disability, and this is a pretty substantial number for just one type of a disability, which means it's important to know about it and what it means. And what also is true is that people with physical disabilities are more likely to develop depression or anxiety, which means that in addition to their physical disability, they are likely to develop a mental disorder on top of that, which also makes it very hard for them. And physical activity is shown to help treat such mental disorders by decreasing tension, elevating and stabilizing mood, improving sleep, and improving self-esteem through the release of endorphins. This makes it important that people with physical disabilities have access and opportunities to exert physical activity, because it really helps them and prevent them from developing further disorders on top of the disabilities that they already have. Next, we have developmental disabilities. And developmental disabilities are conditions that can affect people physically or cognitively that start from childhood and are expected to be present for life. Some examples are autism spectrum disorder, Down syndrome, and cerebral palsy. And these are the more common type of disability that is seen in schools. So it's important to know about this. Characteristics of these disabilities are seen through speech, communication, physical behavior, and social behavior, as they tend to acquire skills at a slower pace. About 1 in 6, or 17% of children aged 3 to 17 in the United States have one or more developmental disability. And it has been found that children with disabilities are more likely to be inactive than other children, placing them at a higher risk of obesity and associated health conditions. Finding ways to include these people in sports and the school environment is not only good for their social health and skills, but also for them physically. So basically what we're seeing is this trend that it's really important to include people with disabilities in sports as a way to support them with their physical and their mental health.
So the final group or category of disabilities that we did research on was behavioral and emotional disabilities. So these types of disabilities are mainly characterized by tendencies to be defiant or have difficulty with mood regulation and feelings under situations that people without these disabilities would consider normal or not have challenges handling. So the main difficulties that people with these disabilities face are forming meaningful interpersonal relationships with their peers and trusted adults. Disruptive behaviors in class can be seen frequently. There's an unwillingness to cooperate often, and the majority of this unwillingness to cooperate is typically nonviolent, but there is conduct disorder, which is a behavioral disability, which can become violent at times. And in general, people with behavioral and emotional disability have difficulty participating in school settings, at least without the aid and assistance of another person. And after doing research on this type of disability, we found that currently there's no definite guideline or resource for schools to help students with behavioral and or emotional disabilities in varsity or JV sports teams. And as Anushka was saying, we've found that participating in sports can provide kind of a extra layer for students with disabilities to feel either included or build these types of relationships. And schools with unified sports teams are able to provide an outlet for these students who don't have aid participating in their varsity or JV sports teams. However, many or many schools in Connecticut don't have unified sports available or have very limited sports teams that the students can participate in.
So unified sports is an opportunity to participate in sports and extracurriculars in which people with disabilities can play sports with those without disabilities. So it helps create bonds between varsity athletes and students with disabilities. It also gives students an external task to focus on while building relationships, because it can be very hard to form a relationship when that is the task to go to, but this gives students a way to go about making a relationship without them having to put themselves out there. It also builds recognition and awareness for students with disabilities by creating an environment where they spend a lot of time together and they have to work together. So it's just this positive cooperative environment that can let people without disabilities see what it's like for people with disabilities, and to just develop a connection, some empathy, and just help them feel included and appreciated. And it creates a sense of achievement and accomplishment, because sports is there's a lot of, there's competitiveness and cooperation and teamwork and, winning and losing. And when you win, it's not something that people with disabilities get to experience much because of the limited options that they have. So this does help them get that sense of achievement. It's also effective in decreasing problem behaviors of people with disabilities and increasing their social competence. As I said, like how sports are really good for the mental and physical health. So it helps them with that mental health and feels as if they are accepted into the community that they are a part of with unified sports. And it improves the attitudes of people towards those with disabilities, as I said, as they are stuck in this positive environment in which they are working together and they get to become leaders with regards to one another, and they can build friendships in that way. And all of these benefits make it crucial that all schools not only have a unified sports program, but that it is widely announced and promoted so that people know and people can show up and cheer for it. Because in unified sports, average schools, only about 10% of the disabled people at that school will participate in unified sports.
So we wanted to, when we were thinking about how to address the fact that there aren't unified sports in a lot of schools in Connecticut. I'm a senior at Suffield High School, and especially in the pandemic, we saw a loss of participation and availability of many of the unified sports in our school. So we wanted to make it as simple as possible for students to take the initiative on their own to expand unified sports and bring them into their schools, because like Anushka was saying, the student enthusiasm is something that's going to really make the presence of unified sports in a school worthwhile. So we made this simple student action plan to expand unified sports, and I put the link in the Zoom chat for anyone who would like to look at it closer, but we'll be respectful of your time, so we'll go through it briefly. But we want to make this more widespread and shared so that people know that it's not an intimidating process to go about bringing unified sports to their school. So step one is just to learn more about your school. I'm personally at a smaller school, and in order to have a unified sports program, there has to be demand for it from the students with disabilities and the students without disabilities. And so in order to make this possible, students should really look at their own school first and make sure there is that demand. And athletic directors typically have more information about the presence and popularity of these things. So that's also a worthwhile step. And then really doing research about what unified sports provides to a school is something that students should do next, in that just creating connectedness and recognition of students with disabilities, both during unified sports and just in the hallways or in the cafeterias, when they're not participating, is something that really can be kind of nurtured with unified sports. So talking to other people about these benefits and getting excited about the program before it's implemented is like another crucial step. And then finally, drafting your proposal. Initially we were considering making a mock proposal to show, but considering that every school is different and every school is going to have different needs, we decided to instead ask some questions that could get students making a more personalized proposal for their own school. And so questions, examples of questions are, how many practices are you planning on having per week or per month? Will the team compete against other schools? And are there other schools in the region that have unified sports? And again, athletic directors would have more information about this. So that's another important step. And then on the full student action plan at the bottom, it lists Bob Hale's email, and he's the coordinator of unified sports for the state of Connecticut. And we reached out to him and he said he was excited and willing to be in contact with students who were interested in this or wanted to bring unified sports to their own school. So that's also a useful resource. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. At this time, if we have any questions for our last group, we can take them if needed. If not, I know that we're a little over the time. And first, before we conclude, I definitely would like to thank our corporate sponsors for all their help in making sure that we can put on events such as this one. In conclusion, I would like to state just the great work of all of these groups, especially love the presentation of our last group, Unified Sports. Such a great part of what happens in the state of Connecticut and making sure that we are including as many members of our school community in our athletic programs. Hopefully today you've heard some great suggestions, great ideas, great recommendations of what we can do in our state to look at what we're doing in our communities, whether that would be from the athletic realm, the academic world, the social aspect of our school, which is also very important. So hopefully those of you who are listening can not only implement these ideas in your schools, but also give these ideas to others who are out there and ensuring that we are a state that not only looks at our communities as communities that include everyone in their community, that hope that everyone in their community is respected, has opportunity, and that they feel that they're contributing as members of their community. So I'd like to thank all of our students and those who have participated in our equity meetings on a monthly basis. Of course, the work of Ms. Miller has been tremendous throughout these last 2 years, ensuring that these students have that opportunity, have that voice, and feel that they're being heard. And that should always continue to be our goal as educators in our school community. So I'd like to thank everyone who participated, everyone who was looking on, and we look forward to having you visit more of these group meetings and presentations in the future. So everyone out there, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a good day.